Today we're looking at the ACR Top 75 Aluminium. You get a little booklet. It's boring. You get some nice sound dampening pads that go between the PCB and the top plate. Now in this box we have stabilizers. Clip-ins get a bad rap, but they've come a long way. The keycap puller and the switch puller provided are much better than the ones most brands provide. You get a whole bunch of screws, gold plated, not real gold unfortunately. And last but not least we have little rubber grommets, which connects the brass plate to connect it to the top housing. So we're just going to ignore that coiled cable because we have something better. And you get given two plates. So this one is the brass plate. It's really shiny, really weighty. It's solid, very beautiful. And this would be the polycarbonate top plate. It's really good looking for what it is, but we're going for the brass obviously. Here we've got the PCB. Tear the seal. One thing I notice immediately is no RGB. That seems to be a feature exclusive to the acrylic version of the same keyboard. So here we've got the meat and bones of the keyboard, the top and bottom housing. The colour's not initially what I expected. When I read grey I was assuming a dark grey, but this is more dark gunmetal type thing. The camera doesn't do it justice, but it is actually a lot darker. You've got a sweet rubber mat, dampens a lot of sound. Hopefully it doesn't give the board a muted profile. So we're going to be using the gold standoffs. These will be connecting all of the dampening materials to the top housing and the PCB. First off we're going to be laying down the pad which the switches will be sitting into. This will prevent a harsh bottom out and overall reduce case ping. Nearly done with all the standoffs, and after that we'll lay on the next layer of foam which will prevent the PCB from hitting anything below. So before we screw on the top plate we have to put in the stabilizers. These ones are all south facing while the spacebar is north facing. So the stabilizers, you line it up with the little hole in the plate and you just push it in. And I'm just going to repeat the same steps for the rest of them. Alright, so we're just going to line up the brass plate, screw in all the standoffs. And while I'm doing that you can admire how disgustingly fingerprinted I've made this beautiful brass plate. So for the build today we're going with AKKO Jelly Blacks. They are a CS style switch. They have that box type housing on the top. They're a linear switch with an actuation force of 50 grams and a total travel of 4 to 0.3 millimeters. And they have a 1.9 to 0.3 millimeters of pre-travel. Whilst I do love these new line of AKKO switches, the housing is often really difficult to open. So when you have to open 80 plus and your switch opener isn't working properly, it makes it a bit more difficult. However, the benefits are there's less stem wobble and no dust really gets into the housings over time, which is great. So when you finally get it open and you have a deeper look at it, these are supposed to be pre-lubed, but there is a shameful amount of lube on them. They almost look bone dry. It's a bit disappointing to see. Just touching the spring, looking at my hand, like you'd expect it to be a little bit glistening, but it is bone dry. Very sad. Same with the bottom slides. It's a bit hard to tell because they're clear. However, like the rest, it is very, very dry. After painstakingly pulling apart 80 switches. We have every single piece separated, and of course we're going with the bag lube method. So all the springs, you just chuck them in a bag, slap a bit of lube on them, you give it a bit of a shake, and of course we're using the plastic mold that AKKO provided with the switches to hold the bottom housing, making it a really easy, nice lube station. And with some magic, everything is just going to be lubed and chucked in. So now it's time to put it into the top housing and actually putting this bad boy together. So after that short message from the local wildlife, we will continue chucking these rubber grommets on until we get all the way around. So traditionally, most keyboards have their PCBs resting on a layer of foam on the bottom case of the keyboard, whereas this one, as the name suggests, is top mounted. So it screws into the very top, giving a somewhat gasket type feeling. So when you get around to screwing all these in, you absolutely do not want to over tighten these because you will ruin the whole gasket like feeling if you split the rubber. They do provide a few replacements in the bag, which is good, but hopefully you should never have to use them. So I'm finally ready to plug it in, and after I was done recording I found a much easier way to do it, but I was really struggling here. I couldn't figure out a good way to do it. But with a bit of editing magic, I got it done mad quick. So for some reason AKKO decided to go with an Allen key for the case when everything else was Phillips head. Not sure why. They've provided a small little Allen key, but I'm just going to use my own bit. Alright, well my camera overheated and died, but you didn't really miss anything interesting. I was just doing a lot of screwing in. So we'll flip her over, and now it's time to apply keycaps. So these are a no-name brand you got off Etsy. It's probably just a clone of some JMK sets, but nevertheless they're quite beautiful. Here we're setting up our aviator coiled cable. My favourite part is definitely screwing it in. Beautiful. So here you'll see a little demo of the rubber grommets in action and how they give a little gasket-like feeling. It's not incredibly noticeable, but it does complement the feel of the board. You'll notice it most when you completely bottom out the keys. Since the switches got lubed, they're a lot less scratchy. Overall, because the board's a top mount, it didn't require a lot of modification to make it sound good, but I'm keen to know what you guys think in the comments below. Thanks if you made it this far.